Okay, we are started, so go ahead.
Welcome back to the Common Liberty podcast. I'm Geoffrey.
I'm Eric.
Load the clip. So today, Eric, there's news and ongoing circumstances in Millcreek.
Yeah, from what I can tell, we are starting a pre-development phase on the Millcreek Gateway project that starts with a company called Millcreek Momentum, which is a company that was formed between a property management firm and a private equity firm.
Where are these firms based?
I do believe New Jersey.
Wow. So they're based in New Jersey. Where is this gateway planned for?
Erie.
Okay, it's planned for in Erie.
Right in Millcreek.
Right in Millcreek.
It's our... we have a beautiful isle called Persk Isle that jets out into Lake Erie. I believe it's French for almost an island.
Right. Little island, almost an island.
Something like that. There's a bunch of them across former French territories. But one of the best state parks in the state, probably the best state park in the state.
Yeah.
And they want to add some amenities up there. But a lot of people have been in the community have been generally concerned about the lack of concern and how is it putting kicking the can down the road on stormwater issues.
Okay.
So there needs to be a focus on the needs of the community, not pushing for more expensive shoppings and a boutique hotel, I think is the other term that they used in boutique hotel. I'm just like, we don't need any more hotels.
So they're more interested in the banners and the bunting, but not the infrastructure needs of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe at the same time, there could be some recognition, some effort, some work done on the infrastructure needs. You mentioned the stormwater draining and the flooding in Millcreek has been a historical problem.
Yeah, I think going back to, when was the Millcreek flood? 1916? Something like that?
Right.
Was I right?
Yes, very early 20th century.
But, this is all in pre-development phase. We have to see what they propose, and hopefully it is something good. Also, in the last Millcreek supervisors meeting, we had the announcement of a timeline for the government transition committee for the government change to the 5-person council manager optional plan for second-class townships, which will be exciting. And hopefully when that committee gets together, they'll start getting together, talking to the community about what roles the manager would play and what roles those counselors will play in the new government.
So this Millcreek Gateway to Presque Isle, is that property eventually going to be owned by these firms in New Jersey? Do you see Millcreek selling it to those parties?
I think that's what they plan to do.
Because there was a lot of controversy when they first bought it. It was sort of a backdoor kind of deal where there wasn't a whole lot of public comment.
From what I understand, there were some dilapidated buildings down there. And I know that there were some concerns about paying overpriced for some of these properties. I haven't looked too much into it. I am much more worried about just the lack of focus on a reasonable hierarchy of needs,
right,
of protecting our residents first. And people are looking at these $1 million purchases of this property and then the Gem Gem Shrine Club on Zuck Road, and they're going, this is millions and millions of dollars. Why aren't we focusing on stormwater just a little bit?
Right. It seems like there's been more controversy about bike lanes being added to or carved out of roads and neighborhoods in Millcreek.
Um, I haven't heard too much about it. I would like it personally because in Mill Creek, like, there are so many people riding around on electric bikes nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know the laws of the road. Sometimes driving down to the road to get a late night snack,
Mm-hmm.
and someone was riding against traffic on their bicycle on the side of the road, like at night.
Oh.
I almost hit them,
Wow.
and I'm like, you got to be with traffic. If you're on a bicycle, you ride with traffic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Because Erie is so flat, there is an advantage for people who can't afford a car if they can get an e-bike.
oh, absolutely. I would love to see a large protected bike lane that goes through like the center of Erie, and then you could just flex out, because that's what Erie is. It's a nice long strip along
Right.
the Lake Erie coast, and if we had like a nice protected bike lane, that would be so nice. I think back to my hometown in Hempfield Township. We had the 5-star lane, 5-star trail,
Uh-huh.
and I remember getting on that trail by my house, and then I could ride it very safely to my friend's house a couple miles away. Like, it wasn't perfect, but it was a system where I didn't have to cross any highways. I could get easily from my friend's to my friend's house on my bicycle.
Was that an old rail line?
It runs along a railroad.
Along the Bayfront Connector in Erie, we have these bike trails, paved bike trails, pedestrian trails.
Mm-hmm.
And even in town, there's trails that seem to be the upcycled old rail lines through town.
And but yeah, I would love to see more protected bike lanes in just all of Erie in general. I know a lot of people like to complain, oh, it snows part of the year. And I'm like, if you clear the bike path, people can still use it when it snows. There are plenty of Nordic and northern countries that do that, like in Finland and and in Sweden and Norway. They'll plow the bike path and people will ride their bike to school still. Crazy idea, you can plow the road.
Right, you can plow the road. And it seems like for several years in Erie, especially when Joe Sinnott was mayor, there was a motorcycle culture here in Erie. And there are probably still very many people, including the Iron Wings Motorcycle Club, and there's some other motorcycle clubs in town. But you'd think that kind of history of transportation in Erie would lend itself to bike lanes. There's a lot of old photos of trolleys and previous mass transit in Erie.
I mean, a trolley. A light rail would be nice too.
Right.
Nice light rail right through Erie. That would be great. We really destroyed a lot of our trolley and light tram infrastructure that we had built in the early part of the 20th century in favor of buses and Goodyear tires.
Right.
And
in Morgantown, West Virginia, there's a unique transportation system called the PRT, the Personal Rapid Transit. And this is an elevated line, and it's similar to the tramways that you see in Disneyland or Disney World. And it opened in 1975. It's still in operation, and the cars are...
I think I know. I've been at WVU.
That's
They're
right.
The little yellow.
Yeah, yellow and blue, gold and
They
blue.
were a little sketchy going down those.
Old gold and blue, yeah. Yeah,
But they did get you. They did get you around.
all across town. They're not the fastest beasts because they're built on Volkswagen chassis. And they've slowly made upgrades over the year, but one of the most interesting first week back to school student activities is cramming how many students you can get into one of the little PRT cars. And it's a great way from getting one side of town to the other side of town for students to take classes. And it gets reasonably close from downtown, across town to the stadium, to the hospital, to the engineering buildings, to the Coliseum, which is now called the Hope Natural Gas Coliseum, and students refer to it as the gas chamber.
Oh my gosh.
Right, because the Mountaineers recently beat Brigham Young. So there's a lot of pride in the school, and one of the elements of connection in that community is this PRT system. And so when we talk about other models that Millcreek might consider, starting with bike lanes is definitely an advantage.
Yeah, with Millcreek especially, I do think eventually I would love to see a protected bike lane go from Fairview the whole, maybe even to Girard the whole way through.
That's several miles.
Let's get it to Northeast the whole way.
Right. Yeah.
It'll be a nice, good riding path. But I love protected bike paths because it's so much fun to get out there and just ride. Or when I was a kid and didn't have the arthritis in my knees that I have today. But I remember just riding down that trail, and it was nice and safe, and you could just ride along. There was no way I was going to get hit by a car unless I was at an intersection. It did cross a couple roads, but they were all marked and people stopped, and it was very good. I did have to get to my friend's house. I did have to cut through a hole in the fence that was put in there by some kids who were trying to do that exact same thing a long time ago, I imagine.
Kind of a classic Sandlot kind of scenario.
Yeah, I remember my buddy showing it to me for the first time, and it was me and him and his sister were going to get some food at the Wendy's nearby, and we ride down there, and one of them holds open the corner of the fence, and we all
when I was a kid, I lived on a big hill, and it was an entire neighborhood called McKinley Hill, where I grew up. And when you go to the top of the hill, back into the woods, there was a trail that me and my crew from the neighborhood, we called the Tarzan Trail. You could start at the top of the trail in the woods and race down through the forest. We built a couple jumps. We built some ramps out of logs and dirt and such. But at the very bottom of the hill, there were these vines hanging down from the trees. And the goal was to race down at full speed till you get right to the vines, and you grab onto the vines and swing away and let your bike run. So when you're 12, that's a great afternoon of fun.
I had a lot of woods right near my house, and I would take my bike back there. I could probably still walk around there with perfect memory to this day. Every tree,
Right on. So when we talk about the natural beauty of Erie, and especially Presque Isle, right in Lake Erie, as you mentioned, not just the lake, but where Erie itself is located has played an important role in how people travel over the last several hundred years, really. In the corner between the mainland and where Presque Isle, that peninsula, juts out into Lake Erie, is where the Erie's Indians had a camp. Mm-hmm. It wasn't their main area of residence, but they did have a camp there because it was good for fishing and hunting. And then when you move forward about 150 years or so, in the mid to late 19th century, Erie was one of the terminal points for the Underground Railroad. And that meant there were patrols through the areas, and there are still residences in Erie that have underground tunnels built in.
I didn't know that.
Dixon Tavern, which is at 2nd and French Streets, was a well-known point of departure for free human beings to exit the Underground Railroad and maybe go to Canada, or to go west to Toledo, Ohio, or even Cleveland. But the reputation of Erie being a terminal point on the Underground Railroad even led to elements of the community, including a certain barber who was an African-American gentleman, and his focus was helping people who just got off the Underground Railroad, giving them haircuts, helping them find new clothes, kind of giving them the look like they were ready to start a new life, and maybe could have been ready to work in a nearby business, or to look for their own property and to start maybe their own business, like the barber himself. So as we look at, this history of travel, even after the Underground Railroad was fully in operation, we look at 1917 when General Electric built its locomotive factory and built a whole town, Lawrence Park, to do that. And now, in 2026, we're not just talking about bike lanes, but what about high-speed rail from Cleveland to Erie to Buffalo to Rochester, or from Toledo to Cleveland to Erie to
Pittsburgh,
yes,
Harrisburg, Philadelphia, New York.
When we look at a map of the high-speed rail lines that China has built in the last 30 years, and we lay that map over the United States and Canada, it's easy to see what their engineering prowess has produced. And we have to ask ourselves, we're the United States, we can do it better. Can't we do it better?
It's hard to do it better when a lot of our, I guess this could be a good transition.
Can we do it at all with the other priorities?
The biggest thing with doing big projects is we have lots of smart people. We have lots of capable workers. We have lots of skilled work, like all of this stuff. A lot of them are tied up doing military projects.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here in Erie we have Parker Lord, I do believe.
Right,
right. They produce some military equipment, I do believe.
That's right.
I do believe there's been some talks to add a shipbuilding facility here in Erie for the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
Why can't we be building ships, just regular shipping ships, cargo ships?
Right.
We can transition out of this, and then we also wouldn't have the military needed to go do stupid wars like we're doing right now.
Yeah, the war in Iran seems to be tactically pointless. It seems to be only a diversion from the Trumpstein files and the fact that Donald John Trump is a pedophile, and he's been credibly accused by numerous women and by a U.S. military veteran named Sasha Riley. In fact, there was a case brought against Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein in 2016. And the woman's name was Katie Foster. And so Katie Johnson. And the case was actually brought in 29 Palms, California. And it was filed April 26th of 2016. And it names Donald J. Trump and Jeffrey Epstein as the defendants. And it certainly alleges this case.
I've heard Katie Johnson's name before.
Alleges all the terrible things that Donald Trump is trying, and the rest of the Republican pedophile protectors are trying to distract from. And Donald Trump is even on recorded audio saying, don't release the Epstein files. If he goes down, he's taking everybody with him. We're now experiencing, the aftermath of the initial bombing runs on Iran. And, of course, Iran has responded with ballistic missile attacks throughout the region. An interesting fact about those ballistic missiles is that Iran purchased them from Colonel Oliver North.
I mean, Iran also has its own very advanced missile manufacturing system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got away from Iran after the Islamic Revolution in 1979, but we cut them off. So they had to develop their own systems and structures to produce military equipment to defend themselves because they weren't getting it through anywhere else. So now they have a pretty robust drone making systems. They have the hypersonic Fatah 2 missile. They have just tons of much less powerful ballistic missiles and just an ability to produce a ton of them and continue to produce more because most of these facilities are built into mountains.
Right.
And
Russia has a strong relationship with Iran in terms of the development of the technology.
Yeah, I don't think like they're the strongest allies per se. I think their allyship is very much anti-American.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Same with China. Like China, Russia, and Iran are all three very different countries with very different governments. What they have alignment is, you know, America being the world's police and attacking innocents, you know. I mean, there was an attack in Iran right at the beginning of the attacks. 165 children in an elementary school were killed in the town of Minrab in southern Iran. And 165. Like, there's no point to this war. It's all about money and oil. You know, one of the things I've been seeing pushed over and over again in the media is for Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah who was overthrown in the 1979 Islamic Revolution, going, oh, you guys can install me and there will be a democratic transition and blah, 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 blah. I don't believe him. Not at all. This is a guy that was installed by the U.S. and sold off all of the Iranian oil fields to the I do believe it's the Anglo-American Oil Company called BP today.
British Petroleum.
British Petroleum. Yes, back in the day it was I think it's the Anglo-American or Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Or Anglo-American, I can't remember.
That sounds about right. In 1953, Norman Schwarzkopf was the first CIA agent into Iran. He organized the Savak, which was the Iranian secret police, tasked with rooting out and destroying opposition to the coup that the CIA in the United States was putting in place in Iran. Of course, this is the same Norman Schwarzkopf who was the commanding general of the Iraqi Desert Storm War in 1991. And so in 1953, there are so many young Iranian boys and girls watching their parents disappear, hearing and seeing the stories of adults being tortured, maimed, killed. So it's no surprise that 25 years later, in 1979, that there would be a revolution to overthrow. And taking 56 hostages, something like that.
They did release 10 African-American hostages, though,
right.
Because they did not believe that they should oppress people that are oppressed in their own country.
Isn't that civilized? Yeah.
That was it was a act of solidarity I wasn't expecting. I didn't know that till recently.
Right.
And I was like, I didn't expect that one.
Well, I think it might have been 7 or 8 years ago that Ben Affleck directed a movie called Argo.
Yeah, that was more than 7 or 8 years ago, I think. I don't know. I'm going to have to Google it now.
But that was a really impressive film for Ben Affleck. And the script writing and the period costumes really made it an excellent film. And beneath it all, we have to ask these questions about Mr. Pahlavi and what his intentions are. Because we know that Iran has tremendous oil reserves. There's also tremendous rare earth mineral reserves. And so when we're looking at all of these wars that Trump has started, Venezuela, okay, bombing Lebanon. He bombed Iran last year in 2025, apparently.
In the 12-day war.
Yeah, didn't do a good enough job. Got to come back and do more, especially since the Trumpstein files have been released. So there's numerous questions about the ability of the military-industrial complex to sustain itself.
And, I mean, I think I heard Pete Hegseth. He was talking about how they are running out of these anti-missile systems.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I do believe, probably what Iran's plan is. Wait until they get out and then launch a big attack. But
the other,
we could have avoided all of this by, not attacking Iran.
Right.
And
negotiations were occurring, and then the bombing began February 28th, around 2:30 a.m., just after the United States assumed the chairman position in the United Nations Security Council.
Mm-hmm. That would be 10 a.m. local.
Some people will say the toilets on the USS Gerald Ford had to be cleaned out first. One of our aircraft carriers. Now, maybe that's true. I don't know what...
I heard that they are... The Gerald Ford was on a 6-month tour, and they're 2-month past that.
Mm-hmm.
But Argo was 15 years ago.
Okay.
2012.
Wow. So still relevant.
It was a good movie.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Yeah.
The beginning part's probably the most accurate and important part.
Right.
The rest of it is a little dramatic, but it was still really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
They weren't chased out of the airport like that. They kind of just boarded it, and it was fine.
So Trump has said that this conflict could last 2 to 3 weeks, and then
said 4 to 5 weeks.
Later he said 4 to 5 weeks.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know he had even come back. I had only heard the 4 to 5 weeks.
He never gives a straight answer.
And then we have our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, talking about how...
DUI hire.
Talking about how this is a Christian war and all kinds of stuff, and which doesn't surprise me considering he is all obsessed with Crusader tattoos and Deus Vault and...
That's a really good point, Eric. In some of Saturday's news about the invasion, this was branded as the start of World War III. And it seems like there's an appeal to some of the conservative base and the religious nationalism that we see coming out of that. And they've been programmed to believe that Jesus will return and everything will be fine.
Well, there's some there's some people that have been pretty upset about their orders recently because they've gotten orders that are like, oh, we're going to do this, and bring about the return of Jesus. And people are like, what? They're like, I'm not religious.
Well, that is also a modern issue in Israel, that they believe their nation descended from Jacob, whose name then became Israel, and thus Israelis or Israelites. Okay, and they view the Muslims as sons and daughters of Ishmael,
Yep.
and call them the Ishmaelites. So their race, their nationalistic mission in terms of theology is to bring about the return of Moshiach, the Messiah, and it involves the sacrifice of a red heifer that people must participate in. And there have been actual red heifers, they're rare, but red heifers born and then processed. And the product that's processed out of this red heifer is put into toothpaste so that all the Israelis brushing their teeth can take part in this. And there's other things like the temple has to be rebuilt and all kinds of other preconditions that if they all
I know
line up.
there's a lot with like this one's going back. We got to go back to the Mike Huckabee talk show days because he's our wonderful ambassador to Israel. He had an interview with Tucker Carlson recently that went pretty off the rails.
Tucker Carlson's not a fan of the Iran war either.
Oh, he's not a fan of what's happening in Israel. He's not a fan of the Iran war. That's mainly because he's a white supremacist. But he did go and interview Mike Huckabee and then was arrested in Israel afterwards, which I thought was pretty wild. But like I remember as a kid in private school for a little bit when I was there, like they talked about like going to Israel and like they have like Christian tours that they do in the evangelical circles that is just it's kind of weird and I don't get it.
Well, I think when we look at what's going on in Israel and specifically in terms of the Gaza genocide, the Palestinian genocide, that level of human sacrifice is really consistent with the worst accusations that have been leveled against Trump. But it's also consistent with what almost every other United States president has done, with maybe the exception of Jimmy Carter. And we talked about the number of years that the United States has been at peace rather than at war.
We have not. We've been at war most of the time.
That's right. That's right.
There's a book I haven't read. I've read parts of it, I should say. War is a Racket by Smedley Butler.
Ah, yes.
And he talks a lot about how, a lot of he's a decorated soldier and he's going, what was I fighting against? Farmers looking for an 8-hour work day and not to be paid in coupons.
Right.
And
Smedley Butler's an important figure in 20th century American history.
And then there was another plot with him. They were going to install him and he was like, what? No.
There was a business plot.
The business plot, that's it.
To overthrow Franklin Delano Roosevelt because he was pro-labor and the conditions really demanded it. And especially when you consider the Battle of Blair Mountain in West Virginia in 1921 was still a fresh memory in the cultural consciousness. And Smedley Butler became very famous for his service to the country during World War I and his leadership in the military following that. And he was well known to General Dwight Eisenhower and other important military figures of the era. But when the business plot came about and Smedley Butler smelled, they want to install me as a strongman type ruler, as an antidote to this pro-labor president, the interests of the military-industrial complex become very clear. And even as General Eisenhower warned us about that in January of 1961,
Man, you got the date right for that. I knew it was Eisenhower. I didn't know it was January 61. Good on
So,
ya.
thank you. Yeah, just a couple days later, that was when John F. Kennedy had his inaugural address. And he made the famous quote about liberty. And wherever we see our foes, we will challenge them. Whenever we see our allies, we will support them. But in all things, we will always defend the cause of liberty. And so John F. Kennedy is a major inspiration here. In 1954, it was Nikita Khrushchev who addressed the United Nations and banged his shoe on the podium and said to the American delegation, "We will bury you. We will destroy you from within." And lo and behold, we have a president that is demolishing the White House unlawfully, engaging in wars without congressional consent, and even Republicans in the Senate have said, no, this is a war that we cannot have. We're already seeing the gas prices leap in the middle of the affordability crisis.
And like everyone in America already knows how bad our past wars in the Middle East were. Like, no one is buying weapons of mass destruction. You know, I saw a meme the other day. It said, archaeologists have found an ancient Israeli tablet from 2600 BC. And it says, the Persians are 1 week away from developing a nuclear bomb. They have been saying this my entire life. And
the Persians are really advanced back then.
Yeah, they're very advanced.
What happened? They even invaded Egypt successfully.
I would love to go to Iran. Like, it has like more historical UNESCO heritage sites than friggin' anywhere, I do believe. It's like going to friggin' Italy. It's like going to Rome.
So the nation of Iran has a certain geographical shape. You might say it's a little bit like a V, with the point coming down to the Persian Gulf. Mm-hmm. And Tehran, the capital, is
up north,
almost due north
on the Caspian, right?
I think that's right. Yes, because the Black Sea is over by Turkey, the Caspian Sea. So Tehran is kind of due north of that point at the bottom of the V, where the ports are and so forth. Now, the holy city of Qom, Qom, is just a little bit south of Tehran, and there's a lot of historical mosques with this incredible tile work, and we don't often remember here in the United States that anytime we're using numbers, we're using Hindi Arabic numerals.
Yeah.
The shape of the number and the angles is actually what defines the number.
And this was because, like, during the European Middle Ages, like, Baghdad was the center of learning, I do believe. Mm-hmm. Baghdad was where all the scientists were hanging out at the time. And they had all kinds of cool inventions that they did, like, that were running off steam. Like, I think they had a boat that was like playing music on a band, like, and they used it once, and they're like, we have records of it, like, a ton, but like,
yeah. Well, you've probably heard of the Baghdad Battery, a very large clay jar that may have contained citric acid or vinegar and an iron rod, and it may have been able to generate electricity. And if
a small amount of light or something.
Right, or maybe even a tool for electroplating gold. Mm-hmm. And so there's a long history of very, very ingenious technological development in that part of the world. And even in Iran, there was, or probably still are, these cooling stations, almost refrigerators, except they're the size of...
They're ice huts.
Yes,
and
they're
I
ice
know
huts.
exactly what you're talking about. They would, like, they're like big cones.
Right.
And they dig it into the ground and then, like, cover it with hay and like to keep insulation,
Yeah.
and they could have like shaved ice in the middle of summer and stuff. And that was there was a lot of ingenious stuff. And then like all over the world though, like every culture has had their own ingenious stuff, you know.
Sure.
It drives me up the wall when people say, "Oh, you know, stuff didn't come from the Americans." I'm like, I think 60% of our food would like to disagree with you. Like potatoes, corn, you know, potatoes and corn in particular are the best. Like as for crops go, but like
The Quechua people in Peru, the indigenous people, developed 4,000 species of corn and 2,000 species of potatoes. And a lot of their cultivation was oriented around the altitude that they could successfully grow these crops in the Andes. And the Pucara people at the northern basin of Lake Titicaca and the Aymara people, the indigenous Bolivians who lived around the southern basin, had Tiwanaku as a capital, and then were eventually superseded by the Quechuas. They definitely cultivated corn and potatoes. Tomatoes originally started out as a pepper.
beans, greens, tomatoes.
Yeah, and it was the Spanish conquistadors that took that stuff back to Europe, and then the potato made its way to Ireland so that we can have Irish guacamole.
Yeah.
And
And
another part of Iranian
there's a whole
culture.
big story about them not wanting to eat them because they're part of. They thought it looked like what? Which plant? It's part of the
Well, in
nightshade family or something.
that's right. Yes, tomatoes are part of the nightshade family, and in the medieval ages in Europe, they were called wolf's peaches, and they were thought to be poisonous, even though they were not. Probably eating a bad tomato or a spoiled, rotten tomato is probably not a great idea. But just coming back to our solidarity with the people in Iran, the paisley symbol actually originates in Iran. It's a symbol of eternity. And even today, there's the Paisley Park Studios that Prince owned in Minneapolis.
Oh.
So it became very popular in the 60s because it was counterculture, but it actually is deeply rooted in Iranian culture.
Okay, I thought that paisley had come from. I knew that like in the '60s they started reusing a lot of like '20s advertisements spiced up, and that even comes from Iranian culture.
It didn't come from Mike Myers and Austin Powers.
Oh, definitely not.
It came from Iran.
I do love that movie though.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think we've touched on a couple subjects locally and nationally and internationally that show we have some common interests and that war is not the way to solve these issues. And most people are really hungry in the United States for universal health care, an improved educational system that doesn't divert money to schools for questionable agendas, shall we say. And so, Eric, do you have any closing thoughts?
I don't think there's anything from me.
Well, all right. Thank you for tuning in to the Common Liberty podcast. Load the clip, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Have a good night.